The morning light fell across the crystal gardens of Velar, where the air was always cold and perfect. Walked through the white pathways, her skin reflecting the pale glow like polished glass. Every looked similar to humans, except they were too perfect, too clean, and too empty. Her own reflection stared back at her from every surface, and she hated what she saw today. This was the day. The sixth selection festival was beginning and would stand before the males of her species once more. 5 times she had stood in the Great Hall. 5 times she had been rejected. The shame was burning inside her, though we're supposed to feel nothing but logic. Her mother waited in their home, a structure of white metal and glass that felt like a cage. Her father stood by the window, his expression blank. He had not spoken to since she failed the first selection. In culture, rejection from a mate was the worst possible failure. It meant something inside you was broken. "You must accept the genetic modification," her mother said, not looking at. "The doctors can correct your emotional responses. They can make you acceptable." Said nothing. She had heard this argument many times. The modification would change her brain, making her more like all the others. She would no longer ask questions. She would no longer wonder why they lived this way. She would become perfect, which meant she would become nothing. "I will not," finally said, her voice quiet. Her mother turned away. This was the way of showing anger. They did not shout or cry. They simply stopped looking at you. The news came through the information systems that day. The council had made a decision. A new species called humans would arrive for a cultural exchange. These humans came from a primitive world called Earth. They were young, emotional, and lived very short lives. The council called them interesting to study, the way one might study simple animals. Felt something strange move inside her chest. Curiosity, another sign of her defect. The grand hall filled with thousands for the arrival ceremony, stood with the other females, all waiting to see these strange creatures from a far world. The humans entered and had to look twice because they seemed so fragile. They had soft skin and warm bodies. They moved in uneven ways without the perfect precision of. There were 5 humans. 4 wore military clothing and 1 wore the formal dress of a leader. The leader was a male, tall and straight-backed, with dark eyes that actually looked at people. When he looked around the great hall, his gaze moved carefully, taking in each detail. He was not judging. He was trying to understand. Had never seen anything like this before. The council speaker began the formal welcome. The words were the same every year, about shared knowledge and cultural exchange. No one was really listening. They studied the humans as specimens. The humans looked uncomfortable and out of place. The tall male with the dark eyes looked directly at. Their eyes met, and something happened that the council said was impossible. The people had something called genetic bonding. It occurred between specifically selected partners whose DNA matched perfectly. It created an instant feeling of rightness, of connection, of purpose. The council controlled these matches with computers and genetic analysis. Random meetings did not create bonding. Bonding with someone not approved by the council was considered defective, a sign of emotional instability. But felt it. She felt the pull, the connection, the sudden certainty that this damaged, broken feeling inside her had a name. It felt like purpose. It felt like coming home. It felt like the thing that had always said she lacked. Before her mother could stop her, before her training could stop her, before her own logic could stop her, moved. She walked across the great hall toward the human male. Every eye followed her. This was not how things were done. The human male looked surprised as she approached him, had learned human language from the council's information systems. Her accent was not perfect, but her words were clear. "Will you be my husband?" she asked. The human's eyes widened. Behind her, heard her mother make a sound that meant disgrace. The males looked away, unable to process what they were witnessing. The council members began speaking in rapid, urgent tones. The human male did not run away. He did not laugh. He looked at with an expression she could not read, but it was real. It was genuine. It was not the blank look of her own people. "I'm sorry," he said, in an accent different from hers. "I don't even know your name." "My name is," she said, "and you are the human called David Brooks." The human named David looked confused. "How do you know that?" "The council provided information about your delegation," explained. "You are a lieutenant commander. You have served your military for 12 years. You value principles of honor and duty. You read human history books for pleasure, not for study. These things make you different from your own people, just as I am different from mine." David stared at her. "I just arrived today." "Yes," said, "but the council's information is accurate. You are the one I was looking for without knowing I was looking." The council guards began moving toward. David put his hand up to stop them, though he had no authority to do so. It was a human gesture, something would never understand. "I would like to sit down," David said, "and talk to for a while if that is allowed." The council leader approached them. "The female is emotionally unstable," the leader said. "She has been rejected 5 times. This is a malfunction of her genetic sequence." David looked at, then back at the council leader. "Where I come from, when someone is brave enough to take a chance, we do not call it a malfunction, we call it strength." Felt something warm spread through her body. This was what she had been missing. This was what her people had taken away from her. This was hope. The council to discuss what had happened. They could not prevent David from spending time without violating the diplomatic protocols. They could not reject her again officially because she had been the one doing the choosing. For the first time in her life, had broken the rules, and the rules did not know how to respond. David sat within the observation chamber, looking out at the crystal gardens. He did not know what had just happened, but he did know one thing. This female was not broken. Her people simply did not understand her value. And for the first time since her birth, felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. David Brooks could not sleep. He had been on Velar for 3 days, and every night was the same. He lay on the white bed in the white room and thought about. In his military training, he had learned to control his thoughts. He had learned to process information logically, but had broken something in him, something he did not want to repair. On the morning of the 4th day, there was a message. Wanted to see him. The council had approved a limited meeting, though David could feel their disapproval like a weight in the room. They assigned him a guide, a male named who explained the bonding process with scientific detail. "The female will not understand your resistance," said. "Her emotional systems have been damaged by rejection. She may become difficult. We offer to treat her condition during your stay." David listened but said nothing. He was beginning to understand that they confused many things with malfunction. They confused independence with defect. They confused questions with instability. They confused love with genetic programming. Waited in a garden, surrounded by white flowers that smelled cold and sharp. She was wearing different clothing today, something closer to human dress. She had been studying, David realized. She had been learning about him. "I apologize for my directness," said, beginning the conversation. "The council explained that human bonding is different. Humans do not recognize genetic matching. Humans bond through a process called courting, which involves time and knowledge of each other." David smiled. At least one of them was willing to understand. "That's right, I barely know you, and I only met you yesterday. Where I come from, when someone asks you to marry them, you are supposed to know their full story first. Their family, their history, their values." Nodded slowly. "Then I will tell you these things." Over the next week, this became their routine. Would find David and they would talk. She asked him questions about human history, about war and peace, about why humans cried when they were sad and smiled when they were happy. David tried to explain the complexity of human emotion, the way logic and feeling work together in the human mind. "On Velar," said one day, "emotion is considered a malfunction. Logic should control everything. Feeling should not exist." "That sounds lonely," David said. "What is lonely?" asked. David did not know how to answer. He had never thought about it before. Lonely is when you want to connect with someone but you cannot, when you feel something but no one else does. Was quiet for a long time. I have always been lonely then. I feel things my people do not feel. I ask questions no one else asks. The council says this means something is broken inside me, but you are asking the same things I ask. Maybe the council is wrong, David said. The authorities began to show their concern through action. His family cut off contact with her. The council moved her to isolation housing, claiming it was for her protection. They sent David a formal message explaining that was a genetic error, and continued interaction would only worsen her condition. David was angry. For the first time since arriving on Velar, he spoke directly to the council leadership. "If she is broken," David said, "then your entire species is broken because she wants the same things humans want. She wants freedom. She wants choice. She wants to decide her own future. You call these things malfunction. We call these things human rights, and she is demonstrating them." The council leader, a female named, did not respond to anger. She simply stated facts. The female will need to be processed. If she wishes to continue existing in Velar society, modification is necessary. That night came to David's quarters. She had bypassed security somehow, moving through the white corridors with purpose and determination. She was different now. Something had hardened inside her, or perhaps something had finally broken free. "I have decided," she said. "I will not accept modification. I will not stay on Velar." "Where will you go?" David asked, though he already knew the answer. "With you, to Earth, to your people who will not call me broken for being myself." David wanted to tell her it was not that simple. He wanted to warn her about what she was giving up. But he saw the determination in her eyes, and he knew that did not make decisions lightly. Once had chosen something, it became as real as gravity. "The council will not allow it," David said. "The council will have no choice," replied. "My human teacher gave me a word today, refugee, a person who escapes a place that has become impossible. That is what I will be." David understood then. Had been studying more than just human history. She had been studying human freedom. She had been learning how to think like someone who could choose her own future. She had absorbed the essence of what it meant to be human, and there was no council that could force her back into a box. "If you are serious about this," David said, "we need to tell my commanding officer, Captain Hayes. She will know what to do." "I am serious," said, "and I am afraid. Is this the human response you mentioned, fear before doing something important?" David nodded. "Yes, but humans do brave things despite fear. That is what makes us strong, not logic, not genetic perfection, courage." "Stood straight, then I will be courageous." The next morning, David reported to Captain Hayes what wanted to do. Hayes was a military officer who had spent 30 years defending human freedom. She listened to David's explanation, and she did not hesitate. "She has the right to choose," Hayes said, "no matter what government says otherwise." The council would not see it that way. But then the council had never understood what it truly meant to be free, was about to teach them. The council came for before dawn. She was in David's quarters, both of them aware that this moment would come. The guards moved through the doors with perfect coordination, their movements synchronized and emotionless. Did not resist. She stood and faced them with her hands visible. The lead guard said, "You are ordered to submit to genetic evaluation and processing. You are now property of the state." "I am not property," said, her voice steady. "I am a person. I have chosen to leave Velar." "You cannot leave," the guard replied. "Your genetic code is property. Your departure would constitute theft." David stepped forward. "She is not property. She is a person, and she has the right to leave." The guards looked at David with no expression. "You are not. You have no status here." Captain Hayes had been waiting outside the building. She entered with 4 of her crew, all in military uniform. The guards stopped, uncertain. Humans were not supposed to interfere in matters. "This individual is under protection of Earth Federation law," Hayes said, placing herself between and the guards. "She has requested asylum. You will not take her." The lead guard stepped backward and activated his communication device. Within minutes, security forces surrounded the building. They did not point weapons, but their presence was clear. The message was simple: surrender or face consequences. Hayes walked outside to meet the council leadership directly. She stood in the courtyard surrounded by authority, a single human facing the power of an ancient species. Behind her, the other humans formed a line. "You claim to be a civilized species," Hayes said, speaking to the council leader who had emerged to watch the confrontation. "You claim to have evolved beyond the barbarism of younger worlds. Yet you imprison your own people for the crime of thinking differently. You call yourselves advanced. I see a species afraid of change." Responded with pure logic. "The female is defective. We are protecting our genetic purity." "Genetic purity," Hayes said, "is another word for control, and control built on fear is not strength, it is weakness." "We do not understand human morality," said. "That is your problem," Hayes replied, "not ours." Inside the building, David gave a small bag of supplies. "We are going to run," he said. "The spaceport is 2 kilometers away. My crew will hold the guards here as long as they can. You have to move fast." "I am not fast," said. "My species values efficient movement, not speed." "Then you are about to learn something new," David said. They ran. It was inefficient and chaotic, nothing like movement. But it was fast. Discovered that her body could move in ways her culture had taught her to suppress. Her muscles had strength beyond what was needed for controlled, precise motion. She had capacity for speed. Behind them, the guards began to move. Hayes and her crew blocked the corridors, creating obstacles. It was not violent. It was simply humans being inconvenient. They lay across doorways. They moved slowly in front of pursuing guards, always staying just in the way without directly fighting. "Humans are inefficient," one guard said to another. "No," a second guard replied, beginning to understand. "Humans are using efficiency as a weapon. By moving slowly and irregularly, they prevent our pursuit. They have turned our logical expectations against us." At the spaceport, David's ship was waiting. The pilot, a human named, had the engines running. Docking control tried to stop them, but systems could not prevent human ships from launching if the humans decided to override protocols. David pushed toward the ship's door. She turned back to look at Veeler one final time. She saw the white buildings, the crystal gardens, the place where she had spent her entire life being told she was broken. She saw the guards running toward them, too late. As they entered the ship, one guard reached out and tried to grab her arm. David pulled her back and the door closed between them. The guard stood on the platform, staring at his hand as if unable to understand what had just happened. Did not fail at tasks, but he had failed. The ship lifted away from the surface, pushed the engines past normal operational capacity, heading toward deep space where the pursuit could not follow. Stood at the observation window, watching her world become smaller. She had no family. She had no home. She had no status. Everything she had been, everything she was supposed to become, had been left behind. "Are you okay?" David asked. "I do not know," said. "I feel pain. Is this acceptable for humans?" "Yes," David said. "Humans feel pain when we lose things we care about. It means you loved something even if it hurt you." "Veeler hurt me," said, "but I loved it anyway. Is this human weakness?" David stood beside her, watching the pale planet disappear into the darkness of space. "No, it is human strength. We love things that hurt us. We feel pain when we lose them, and we keep living anyway. That is what makes us strong, not perfection, not control, resilience." In the command center, brought up a star map. The journey to Earth would take 3 weeks in hyperspace, 3 weeks for her to transform from to something new, 3 weeks for her to become someone the Council could never understand. Veeler stood in the control tower, watching the ship's signal fade from the scanners. Her council gathered around her, their expressions completely blank. "What have we lost?" one council member asked. "Something we did not know we had," said slowly. "The capacity to change, the ability to grow, the power to hold our people only through force, not choice." "She was one individual," another council member said. "She was not important, but understood something that her people were only beginning to learn. One person, refusing to accept the rules, could change everything. One person, willing to walk away, could teach an entire species what it meant to be free." And somewhere in the darkness of space felt it too. She was no longer the broken girl of Veeler. She was someone new. She was human in every way that mattered. Earth was too warm, too loud, and too alive. Stood in the landing bay of the spaceport near Chicago, feeling every moment of her displacement. The air was wet and heavy. The gravity was different from Veeler. Her body did not move the way it was supposed to move. Everything felt wrong. David's sister waited at the gate, a human female with warm brown eyes and dark hair pulled back in a practical style. She looked at without judgment and without fear. "Welcome to Earth," said. "I am going to take you to David's apartment. You are going to meet a whole lot of new things very quickly. Just tell me if you need to stop." Was right, everything was new. The streets of Chicago were filled with vehicles that moved without the perfect precision of transportation. People walked in random patterns. There was noise everywhere, music from buildings, voices calling to each other, the smell of food which was completely unpredictable. On Veeler, all food was the same. Here, could smell spices and cooking and fermentation, and nothing smelled clean. David's apartment was small and warm. The heat made uncomfortable. She asked if they could lower the temperature. They did, but even cold by human standards felt warm compared to Veeler. Her skin was designed for crystal environments. This world was designed for softer species. "You will adjust," said, providing clothes that were nothing like the formal wear of Veeler. Simple clothes, clothes meant to move in, clothes that could get dirty and be washed and worn again. That night asked David the questions that had been building inside her since the moment she left her world. "Why did you help me? You did not know me. You gained nothing. Your government might be angry with you." David sat across from her with a cup of hot tea, something warm was learning to accept. "Because what they were doing to you was wrong. Because I could help and I chose to. Because humans do things for reasons beyond logic. We do things because they are right." "But what is right?" asked. "How do you know?" "We do not always know," David said. "Sometimes we feel it. Sometimes we fail and learn, but we try. That is what makes us human." The first week was difficult. Attempted to understand human customs and failed repeatedly. She did not understand why humans used paper for things when digital systems existed. She did not understand why humans touched each other casually, without protocols. She did not understand food. She did not understand why humans needed sleep for a third of their lives, and why they woke tired despite this. But David's family was patient. Took to a market where was overwhelmed by choice. 30 kinds of apples, 50 kinds of bread, meat from different animals displayed without the sterile perfection of nutrient facilities. "You get to pick what you like," said. "No one is telling you what to eat. You choose because it tastes good to you." Selected randomly and ended up with food she did not enjoy. Laughed and showed her how to select better. This was freedom. This was the ability to make choices and make mistakes and try again. Enrolled in university classes as an independent student. The professor was confused about her background, but universities on Earth had learned to accept unusual life experiences. She sat in a history class and listened to humans talk about their own wars and failures and recovery. She listened to humans debate philosophy and disagreed loudly in ways that shocked the other students. On Velar, she said in response to a question about ethics, we would never have this debate. There would be one logical answer, but humans appear to believe there is value in discussing different perspectives. The professor smiled. That is actually very insightful. Yes, humans learn from discussion, we change our minds, we grow through disagreement. After class, 2 other students approached. They wanted to know where she was from. She told them the truth. She was from another world. They thought this was a joke until David confirmed it. Then they wanted to know everything about Velar, about what it was like to leave everything behind. Told them about genetic bonding and perfect logic and the rejection of emotion. The students listened with expressions of horror and fascination. One of them said something had not expected. That sounds like the worst way to live, the student said. I could not imagine it. I lived it for my entire life, said, and I thought it was correct. Now I understand that my species calls progress stagnation. We call control safety. We call weakness anything we do not understand. The months passed, adjusted, not completely. She still preferred cooler temperatures. She still did not understand human food completely. She still made mistakes in social interaction. But she was beginning to feel something she had never felt before: belonging. David's family treated her like she was one of them. His mother taught her to cook, patiently explaining why different ingredients created different tastes. His father, Robert, took her to see movies, sitting through her questions about why the humans in the images were making illogical choices. Because they are emotional, Robert would say, and emotions make us do things logic would not choose. This seems inefficient, would respond. It is, Robert would agree, but it is also beautiful. One evening, David took to a high place in the city where they could see lights spreading out to the horizon. He held her hand, something humans did that never did. I love you, David said, and I wanted to say it in the human way, in words, rather than in the way which is just matching genetics. Looked at him, confused. Love is another word for genetic bonding. No, David said. Love is deeper. It is when you know someone completely and you choose to stay anyway. It is when you see someone's flaws and you do not care. It is when you would sacrifice anything for their happiness. Understood then. It was what she had been learning all these months. It was the thing that made humans different from It was the reason she had asked a stranger to be her husband, and why he had helped her escape, and why his family had accepted her, and why humans were so powerful despite having short lives and weak bodies. I love you too, said. David pulled out a ring, something humans called a diamond. It was clear like crystal, but it was different. It was not perfect. It had no symmetry. It was beautiful because it was unique. Will you marry me? David asked. Yes, said, and this time her answer came from understanding, not instinct. This time she chose with her mind and her heart together. Below them, the city lights spread out like a map of human possibility. Somewhere on Velar, the council was discussing how to respond to the loss of one female. They were beginning to worry that others might leave. They were beginning to understand that they could not hold their people through control alone. But was no longer thinking about Velar. She was thinking about the future. She was thinking about who she would become. She was thinking about a life lived with choice and love and the beautiful inefficiency of human emotion. The wedding was held at sunset in a garden filled with flowers that bloomed without genetic manipulation. Wore white like a bride, but the dress was designed to move with her body, not to constrain it. She walked toward David with beside her, guiding her through the ceremony with a hand on her shoulder. David stood waiting, and when he saw, his face filled with a kind of joy that could never achieve. It was inefficient and emotional and completely human. They exchanged rings and promises in both and human traditions. The ceremony was logical and formal. The human ceremony was chaotic and emotional and filled with words like love and forever and commitment. I choose you, said in English, and the words meant everything she had learned in her time on Earth. 2 years later, stood in the Institute for Understanding, a building designed by David and funded by the Earth Federation government. The walls displayed images of both Velar and Earth. One side showed the white crystal architecture of the other showed the green and blue and brown colors of the human planet. She taught classes to human students about culture, explaining their logic systems and their genetic perfection and the beautiful tragedy of their society. She taught them how evolution and culture could create beings so advanced that they forgot what it meant to live. David taught classes about human history to who had begun to arrive on Earth seeking asylum. There were only a few at first, a second female, then 2 males, then more. Each one had looked at human freedom and wanted to understand it. Each one had seen something in human choice that their own species had rejected. The first male to arrive was named. He was the guide who had explained genetic bonding to David at the beginning. He had watched Defy the Council, and something had shifted inside him. He had applied for asylum using the same justification had used. He was choosing a different way to live. "Why did you come?" asked him when he arrived at the Institute. "Because you were right," said. "The Council was wrong. Our society is stagnating. We are so perfect that we cannot grow." Within 5 years, there were 200 living on Earth. They learned human languages. They experienced human emotions. Some of them resisted, calling it malfunction, just as the Council had called broken, but others embraced it. On Velar itself, a new movement was growing. Young began asking the same questions had asked. Why was emotion considered defect? Why was individuality considered error? Why could their society not be logical and emotional at the same time? The Council tried to suppress the movement, but they could not. Technology had spread the story to every mind that wanted to hear it. A female had walked away from genetic perfection. A female had chosen a primitive species. A female had refused modification. A female had become human in every way that mattered. The Council called an emergency session, stood before them with data showing the change spreading through their society like a disease. But she did not call it a disease anymore. "It is evolution," she said. "Our species is evolving. We thought we had perfected ourselves and removed the need for change. But the universe demands change. Our stagnation was slow death disguised as perfection." The Council voted to open their society. Modification would no longer be mandatory. Emotion would be acknowledged as part of the mind. Choice would be permitted, even when it led to outcomes the Council did not select. Back on Earth, felt the moment of change like a physical shift. She was in her office at the Institute, working on a new curriculum when David told her. "Velar has changed," he said, showing her the message. "The new government is inviting cultural exchange. They are asking for advisors to help them integrate emotion into their society." Read the message twice. She did not expect tears, did not cry, but she was not fully anymore. She was something new. "I do not know if I want to go back," she said. "You do not have to," David said. "This is your choice." "That is the problem," said. "Humans have too much choice." But a week later, she agreed. She and David would go to Velar to help guide the transformation. They would bring their knowledge, their experience, their understanding of how to be both logical and emotional. They arrived at the spaceport where had first left. The place had changed. There were humans there now and mixed species beings, and who looked at them with curiosity instead of judgment. Her mother was there. She had not been assigned by the Council. She had chosen to come. It was the first time in its entire life that her mother had made a personal choice. They embraced, and its mother said words that would have been impossible before. "I was wrong to want to change you. I was wrong to believe you were broken. I was proud of your defiance, even though I could not say it." It was not perfect. It was messy and emotional and complicated. It was everything the old society had feared. But it was also alive in a way Velar had never been alive before. And David worked with the new government for 3 years, helping understand emotions that their genetics had suppressed for thousands of years. They experienced anger and joy and sadness and fear and everything between. Some of them found the experience painful. Many of them found it liberating. The children born to mixed human couples were something entirely new. They had the physical perfection of Velar and the emotional depth of humanity. They asked questions about everything and were encouraged to find their own answers. Gave birth to a daughter named Emma on Velar, in a hospital surrounded by human and doctors working together. Emma had her mother's clear eyes and her father's warm smile. She was perfect in a completely different way than perfection. She was alive. Years later, when Emma was old enough to understand, told her the story of how her mother had asked a stranger to be her husband. Emma laughed and said it was the most human thing she had ever heard. "But I am part," Emma said. "Yes," replied. "You are the bridge between worlds. You are the future that neither species could have created alone." At the end of the day, and David stood watching the sunset on Velar, a place that had become softer and more colorful with time. The white crystal buildings now reflected light in warmer colors. Gardens grew in more than one shape, walked with less precision and more joy. "Do you ever regret it?" David asked, "leaving your world?" Considered the question. In the beginning, she would have said no, but now she understood the complexity of the answer. "I regret that my species caused themselves so much pain," she said. "I regret that they rejected what made them unique, but I do not regret leaving. I found love. I found choice. I found myself." "And your species found you," David said. "No," corrected. "My species found themselves through me. They learned that perfection and stagnation are the same thing. They learned that strength comes not from control, but from the ability to change. They learned what I learned the day I asked a stranger to be my husband." "What was that?" David asked. "That courage is stronger than logic," said, "and love is more powerful than perfection." The sun descended below the horizon of Velar, painting the sky in colors that the world had never shown before. And everywhere on that world stopped their work and simply watched, feeling wonder without calling it malfunction. It was, in its own way, the most logical thing they had ever done.